I'm often asked what criteria we look for in choosing a site for a development trust, and the answer is many and varied things. Really the things you expect in any property purchase. Obviously the first one is position. We look for convenience, where we can get to build it, so buildability is another important issue. And also we look to market attributes, like where we need to make sure that we're building what the market is requiring in a particular area. Possibly goes unsaid that we need to have the right zoning for a site, so we need to make sure that we've checked the zoning and also cognizant of what the local council wants in that sort of area and is prepared to support. So we go through that process as well. We obviously look at due diligence of the site to make sure that it's not contaminated or in particular bushfire zones or one of 20 other issues that you have to check. But basically it's about making sure it's in the right position, you've got the market covered, buildability and saleability at the end of the day. It is easy to fall into the trap of thinking that property development is easy and a natural win for anyone who does it, but in fact there are a number of pitfalls and risks in development, and our job as the development manager and as a trustee of the trust is to make sure those risks are managed and dealt with. And that starts with meticulous planning of what we do. We make sure that we know everything about a site. The due diligence is absolutely paramount to get that right to begin with. And that happens before we put anything to the market, before we let investors know about what we're doing. We make sure the site is in good order. Obviously, construction costs have been a huge issue in the last 3 to 5 years, so we make sure that we've got that very tightly screwed down again before we go to unit holders with what we're doing. And then once you've planned what those costs, you have to make sure you hold those costs the whole way through. So it's actually a massive management exercise doing a development. So planning's important, the execution's very important, and of course managing the sales risk, which is actually getting the sales at the end of the day, is also something that really has to be top of mind from the very start of the process. And I think it's very difficult for people to involve themselves in development unless they've had significant experience in doing it. So we would say that a way to mitigate those risks is to invest in a Natgen development trust. We talk to a lot of our unit holders who tell us that they've been investing in this sort of thing before. When we actually interrogate that assertion, it's really they've been investing in mortgage trusts that invest in development, and that's actually a really very different thing. What we do with our development trusts is the investors actually invest in the equity of the trust, so they literally stand in the shoes of the developer. So their unit holding acts like equity acts. Now, basically that means that they get all the profits of the development, less any fees that come out along the way, which means that their upside is uncapped. The better performance of the trust or of the development project, the more people make out of it. Conversely, if it goes really badly, the investors can actually lose money as well. It's certainly possible. We do everything we possibly can to make sure that doesn't happen, but it's certainly an aspect of equity one has to be aware of. With the mortgage trusts that basically invest in development projects, that's very different because oftentimes the return available to unit holders is capped. Now this is because this acts like basically a debt product. The upside is limited to whatever the interest rate is, and the downside should also be limited to being paid back first. Sadly, a lot of those vehicles actually don't behave like that on the downside, and people can lose money in them. So we've taken that different approach of having it as an equity product so that people can earn more. So for example, with the trusts I was talking about before, the development trusts where I've shown that we're returning to unit holders substantially more than they expected. If it was a mortgage trust, those rates that we'd put in the information memorandum would probably be fixed. So any of the upside potential of that would, I guess, come back to us as fund managers. But we don't do it that way because we want people to participate in that upside. When buying commercial property, it's always important to look at the income potential of the property, and the income is always provided either by leases or in some instances by rental guarantees. The value of any commercial property is based on its income potential, and thus securing that income potential and making sure that it's certain over time is pretty much the paramount thing that you have to do. Beyond cost control, which is certainly part of our management process, the maximisation of the income potential is the main thing that we do to increase the value of our units and thus the wealth of our unit holders. When looking at the criteria of what we look for an investment trust asset purchase, it basically boils down to the basics of any property investment that any man on the street would know. First thing is position, position, position. Make sure you've got something that's well positioned within the market, and basically in terms of commercial property, that means to ensure that it's well positioned for the people who are going to be the tenants of the property and the customers of those people who are going to be the tenants. If you're looking at shopping centres, for example, you want to make sure that level of convenience extends to appropriate car parking, access and egress from the property, the location within the street network around, and all that sort of thing, basically. So tenant amenity is paramount. That pretty much boils down to convenience. And then just the physical environment of the property. Tenants of commercial properties basically just want to be warm or cool, as the case may be, safe, and in an environment which is conducive to what they're trying to do there, which is either sell things or work, I guess. So once we can answer those questions, we've ticked all the criteria boxes. Beyond that, of course, we look generally to the Natgen investment philosophy, which basically boils down to buy an asset well, manage it really well, and sell it well at the correct time. It sounds simple, but there's an awful lot of moving parts in making those things happen, and that's pretty much what we spend all day, every day doing during the management phase and the acquisitions phase of our projects.